Today we give you some face-to-face at Gen Con 2012. Hello and welcome to Pulp Gamer Prime. I'm Don Depp.
And I'm Scott Forster. Today on the show, James Ernest tells us about the reboot of Cheapass Games, and Jay Little of Fantasy Flight tells us about the new Star Wars RPG.
But first, our impressions of Gen Con. What a party. Had a great time there. Broke some records Gen Con did with over 41,000 unique attendees.
Wow.
That's up from 12% from last year.
Nice.
Even the trade day was up. 232 retailers participated the day before Gen Con to add some tips and tricks to their tool bag. What stood out, I think, the most to me about that event was the number of educators that were there and librarians. Really? Yeah, I took a left turn and there was all sorts of programming tracks and librarians walking around doing all sorts of things.
Fantastic. I love games as a learning tool. So
yeah, it's a hot topic, and I just, I haven't seen it tackled. I guess I haven't wandered in the right hallways, but it's really well represented. So librarians, mark your calendars, Gen Con next year.
Excellent. And Mayfair Games and Pulp Gamer were all over the big screen at Gen Con. The big screen was above each of the three entrances to the dealer's hall. Bob and Angus had silent skits that they were doing, and we had some Pulp Gamer promos up there, and also the debut of our silent steampunk comedy action adventure, Silver and Brass. We also did a short promo for Gen Con itself, which featured our own orc, Grok Bloodface, trying to serve up a pie to possibly some adventurers, who knows. In addition to being on the big screen, Bob and Angus were also spotted outside the convention center, serving up some coffee with a healthy side of news and notes from Mayfair Games and gaming in general.
And stirring up some trouble, too. They certainly had some points to be made. They didn't like the no animals policy.
Right.
No doubt.
They're very, very opinionated, those two.
Yep. Coffee was good, of course, but the beer was even better. Gen Con announced an official beer this year. That caught my attention, naturally, as beer often does, especially good beer. This beer was called the Ale of Destiny. There it is. It was a dark Belgian ale, and I was more than pleasantly surprised because, well, I like dark beers anyway. It had a wonderful roasty flavor, a little bit of smoke notes in it. And if you want to find out more about my impressions about the beer, I've started a brand new beer blog.
A new beer blog?
Dondem.com. Very cleverly named.
Dondem.com?
Exactly.
How did you get that?
I came up with it out of nowhere.
Wow.
So there it is, and don't put too much pressure on me. I don't know if this is going to work. I've always wanted to try to do something, and finally I'm like, beer is inspiring. I brew and do all sorts of stuff.
This was all inspired by beer.
All inspired
Don's
by beer.
new blog inspired by beer.
Maybe I'll do some more things. Taking a geek approach to beer.
Right.
Which I guess your beer is kind of geeky anyway.
Yeah, it can be. Speaking of a geek approach to something, we're relieved to find out that there's a way for you to let your loved ones know your wishes after you've been zombified. You can carry a Zomb Alert and keep it on you at all times. The reverse side contains a short message to your loved ones to let them know what to do with you after you've been zombified. There's a whole bunch of options like double tap, feed me, and run!
Run, that's my favorite. Back away if I'm a zombie.
Right. Don't let Don eat your brain. He'll blog about it.
I love it. More than just games at Gen Con. Speaking of more than just games, my gosh, the costumes were all over the place.
Oh, I know.
I don't know how much of a deliberate attempt or whether it's just a law of math or whatever it is, but there was costumes all over the place.
It's geek critical mass. You get to a certain level and it just becomes a cosplay convention.
I guess.
In addition to everything else that's going on. And if you want to see some of those costumes, we've got a bunch of them in the background of one of our videos.
Yeah, but pay attention to the interview. That's what we're here for. But it's kind of funny to see that crowd and everything going on. The interview that's coming up, of course, James Ernest, good friend of ours. You've seen him on Lone Shark, or heard about him on Lone Shark Live on our network, and know him for, of course, Cheapass Games. From those paper packets that
those little white envelopes.
They didn't include the dice or anything. They just put them together. They're very kind of experimental and all.
And cheap.
Good time, very fun, funny, and now funded through Kickstarter, starting with Unexploded Cow. Let's start with Unexploded Cow. Why did you choose Unexploded Cow as your first game?
It's one of the best games we've ever done that we haven't already licensed to somebody else. It's one of my favorite games. It was an evergreen when it was still in print, and we've made improvements to the rules since then, so it was a perfect choice to restart the company.
Now, were there other contenders, other games that you're like, oh, maybe this one?
You know, another game that I really want to do is Deadwood, which is a movie-making game, but that's more complicated. It's going to be more expensive to do. We thought we would just start with the card game.
Cheapass Games coming back. We've got Unexploded Cow now, and obviously there's going to be something else coming down the pipe then. Can you give us some insight on what that might be?
I don't know, but it's going to be new. I'm working on a bunch of new game designs right now, but nothing that's finished enough for me to tell you about. But we're going to do new games in the Cheapass format, and we're going to reprint games we know are really good in deluxe format.
How soon do you think we will know?
Very soon. As soon as I get done with my Kickstarter campaign, I'll know how much I raised. Some of our higher level stretch goals are basically going to qualify us to just go ahead and print those next games. Our next game is funded. Our next game is funded. And you get a copy of it. As soon as I know how much that is, I'll be able to sort of finalize which games I'm picking. And I'm working on those games, testing those games right now at Gen Con.
Now, of course, looking through your Kickstarter goals, there's something that is obvious right there, but maybe you can tell our viewers about sponsoring a cow.
Right. I hope by the time this airs that there's some of them still left, but we let people sponsor an individual cow, and they'll get their name in the sponsorship list, but they also get to choose its name and feel like part of the product. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that adds a lot of value when you actually participate, which is kind of what Kickstarter's about.
There's cows that cost you extra money when they blow up, the negative cows. There's specialist cows like generals and mechanics that can defuse bombs, and something for everyone in that list.
Now, the general premise of the game, of course, solves two problems. One is all the mad cows in England, was it?
Mad cows from England and unexploded bombs in France. You take your crazy cows, you give them a pep talk, and then you run them through the fields of France and let them discover unexploded bombs.
Which I think is an efficient way to solve this. Did this come from anywhere special, or is this just the brain of James Ernest?
You know, this one kind of came from the news, and like a lot of the games that I designed, just from the joking that my friends and I do. And, you know, obviously, every 5 minutes somebody says that sounds like a great game idea, and this time they were right.
Now, of course, we're used to the cheap-ass games of the past not being as colorful and beautiful as they are, which I think is the way you want to go now. Are there going to be any of those lesser expensive games you're going to put out?
Yeah. All the new games we do are still going to be in the cheap-ass format. They're experiments. They're throwing at the wall and seeing what sticks. There's a lot of older games that are good that need retooling, but there's a lot of other older games that are just gone, and I'm glad they're gone, right? We're only doing the high deluxe treatment on stuff that we know is really popular.
Now, I noticed in your video that you obviously pulled in some help from a local retailer that you've been working with?
Yeah, we shot our play video at Card Kingdom, which is a great retail store in Seattle, and they're partnering with us and helping us get this Kickstarter up and running, and so we can get good product into their store.
Kickstarter's been perceived as being, some people will say, oh, it's a good thing for the industry, it's a bad thing for the industry. What is your comment?
It's a new thing for the industry, and people are afraid of new things, and it's good for me to be able to raise enough money to go back into business. I couldn't do it any other way.
Of course, you can check the show notes at pulpgamer.com. There's a link underneath our show that will take you directly to that Kickstarter project, or just go to Kickstarter and type in the word cow.
Because it's bound to be the only cow-related Kickstarter.
Oh, and James told me that he had promised that if there was 1,200 backers by this Friday, he would dress up like a cow for PAX.
Which is this weekend,
yes.
So we need to get on that.
Get on that quickly, even if it's $1. Just punch $1.
I'm going right now to give $1 to James so he can dress up like a cow.
Pack that costume, James.
Well, there's a new role-playing game to beta test. Fantasy Flight Games announced at their annual in-flight report that they're releasing beta test copies of their new Star Wars role-playing game called Edge of the Empire. The first playtest copies were available Friday at Gen Con. We caught up with the designer, Jay Little, to find out all the details. I've got the designer here, Jay Little, who you may know from other games like Blood Bowl Team Manager and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Jay, tell me about this new game you got.
Well, Edge of the Empire is really exciting, where we get to explore the fringes of the Star Wars experience, the scum and villainy sort of area, the adventures that Han and Chewie have, smuggling, and those sorts of endeavors. We decided that it was too difficult to take the entire collective experience of what Star Wars means to people and put it into one game. So we decided to actually release it in 3 games, each one which is going to be its own independent product, but completely cross-compatible. And Edge of the Empire is the first of that, and we're really, really excited about this. The response so far has been very good.
Very cool. I was looking at it down in the room, and the dice system in it, it kind of reminded me of one of your other designs, the Warhammer game that you did for Fantasy Flight. Tell me about how that works and what advantages that gives a DM and a player.
Well, there's obvious similarities to the work that I did in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which introduced some unique custom dice to the game. The goal behind those is to create more resources for the players while they're at the table to be able to accomplish the sorts of things that they want their characters to do, as well as give the GM the resources to be able to steer the story in the way he'd like. So we had 3 years of experience from what we had learned with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and refined the dice pool concept and adapted it to what we thought would tell the better space opera and action that the Star Wars universe is known for.
Now, you talk about doing specific things for Star Wars. I was looking through the book last night, and I saw the obligations, I think it is.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that mechanic, how that works.
I love the obligation system. In fact, if there was one thing to define what we consider the edge of the empire or the scum and villainy aspect of this role-playing game, I really think it's obligation. At the beginning of character creation, before you even select a race or a class, you have to select what you owe, your obligation. Each person starts with some sort of obligation to somebody else. You might owe money to the Hutts. You might be a wanted criminal. You might have a bounty on your head. You might be AWOL from the Imperial Academy. Each person starts with something hanging over their head. Then you go on and start to build the rest of your character. The great thing about that is obligation has already started to build background and connections between the characters. Later on during character creation, you have a number of points that you use to buy characteristics, skills, and other things for your character. You can choose to take on additional obligation to gain extra experience points.
Nice.
But obligation has both a narrative and a mechanical impact on the game. I don't want to give away too much, but the GM has a way of having that come back to haunt the characters if they keep on pushing their credit limit too much.
Very nice, very cool. Now, right now it's in beta test. How can people get in on that?
Well, to get in on the beta test, what we have right now is a physical printed book. It's full color, more than 200 pages. It should be available through your local retailer. If it's not, contact your retailer and ask them to get in touch with Fantasy Flight Games. We have the beta available through those channels, both as a single book, as well as retailers can request a packet, which comes with several books as well as some other materials to help them promote it at their store.
Nice. And about how long do you foresee this beta test going on before we see the finished game?
That's a great question. It's probably the question I get asked the most. And the question is, the beta will take as long as the beta needs. At my heart and soul, along with the rest of the development team, I want to make the best Star Wars role-playing game possible for FFG with the time, assets, and resources we have. Right. We have an amazing team of people, and the beta is going to give us the opportunity to really listen to the players and find out ways to refine the experience, tailor it to what they're expecting for this Edge of the Empire style game, as well as balance a lot of things like weapon damages or ability costs. But since we had announced 3 role-playing games, you can tell that whatever system or structure that we want, if we want these role-playing games to be compatible, has to be rock solid.
Right.
So the beta is going to take as long as it needs so that we can put out the best possible product.
Awesome. That's Jay Little with Fantasy Flight Games. He's got new Star Wars RPG, Edge of the Empire, coming out soon. You can beta test it. Check out fantasyflightgames.com. Thanks a lot, Jay.
Thanks, Scott.
Those beta test copies are retailing for $30, but it is a pretty nice, hefty, full-color book that's got art and charts and all that. So, I mean, it remains to be seen how many people are willing to pay money
Beta copy. Hell, this
test
is a ready-to-play game, isn't
I know, yeah. I mean, that's pretty much what they're saying. Jay said that they're hoping to not make too many changes, just a few, tweak powers and whatnot, and the rules should be pretty solid. So, it's a full game.
All right, well, we had a great time, and of course, we're looking forward to next year's Gen Con, where we can have some absolute more from, and who knows what's going to be in store for us then. But of course, we're turning our attention right now to the Worldwide Catan Championship that's going to be just in a couple weeks, September 14th through the 16th. And you can watch that streaming live from livestream.com/Mayfair Games.
Awesome. So, should be a good time.
It will be. We'll see you there.
PulpGamer.com